So I have this theory. I think that nearly every single one of us is a geek or a nerd in some way. What I mean is this. Nearly all of us have that one subject that we become uber knowledgeable in. We become deep reservoirs of knowledge and will speak at length at no end on this subject. For me, that subject is U.S. history. More narrow, specifically, U.S. presidential history. In fact, I'm so knowledgeable at it. Recently, I won a radio contest where the name of the game was U.S. presidential history. I can name all 44 U.S. presidents in order. I can tell you the political parties of each and a bit about each individual. The point? Well, most of us know about George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Franklin Roosevelt, there are that group of presidents that are the forgotten presidents. The James K. Polks, Millard Fillmores, and Rutherford B. Hayes. And today I'd like to highlight one of those presidents. One that I feel is underappreciated. The president I'm talking about is this man, ChesterArthur. So today I'd like to briefly tell you a bit about ChesterArthur, and I'd like to do it in 3 parts. First, I'd like to tell you about his early life and education. Second, about his rise in politics and his professional career. And third, about his presidency. So I'll begin by talking about him as an individual. His father was an Irish immigrant. His mother was a native of the United States. His father immigrated first to Canada and lived in a town near the Vermont border. On the other side of that border, near Canada, lived his mother. This close proximity would bring the two together. They would meet, court, and eventually marry. ChesterArthur was their 5th of 9 children. His father was a man of many professions: educator, preacher, and lawyer. Now, his primary profession was as a preacher, and he was a staunch abolitionist, and this had oftentimes put him at odds with some of the congregations, and so quite frequently the Arthurs had to move. But his father saw to it that his children had one constant and one stable thing in their life, and that was that he saw that each and every one of them received an education. Arthur would eventually, in 1845, enter Union College in Schenectady, New York. Following his graduation from Union College, he would become a teacher himself, and eventually become a principal at the school he taught at. During this time, he went back to school and was studying the law, eventually being admitted as a member of the bar. So into his professional career we go. Arthur quickly acquired a position with a well-respected civil rights law firm in New York. And in 1884, he represented Elizabeth Jennings Graham. Now, her case was very interesting. This is 100 years, 1854, more than 100 years before Rosa Parks. But you see, at the time, even in New York City, a northern state, the streetcars were segregated. And Miss Graham was asked to give up her seat and move to the back of a streetcar. She refused. She, however, did have some money and later sued the streetcar after she was thrown off of the streetcar for refusing to give up her seat, alleging that her civil rights had been violated. I'm not talking about Rosa Parks. This is more than 100 years before her. Arthur represented her and won the case. This got him profound respect and brought him to somewhat of prominence in New York City. But he would for a while leave New York City and go to Kansas, which at the time was an epicenter of the rising tensions between the North and the South as the nation marched towards the Civil War. The conflicts that were going on in Kansas proved to be too much for Mr. Arthur, and he soon returns to New York to continue his practice. He fell into the favor of Governor Edwin D. Morgan, who soon assigned him to the post that would eventually lead towards him becoming the quartermaster of the soldiers from New York during the American Civil War. Arthur was very effective at the job, and his men were some of the most well equipped during the war. However, it was a political appointment, so when the political winds changed and a new governor of another political party came into power, Arthur was soon released of his duties. However, the connections he made with Mr. Morgan would be pivotal towards his later career. His connections with Governor Morgan put him in favor with the political machine or group, one of the most important groups in the Republican Party at the time. That was a political machine of a man named Roscoe Conkling. Largely, those who were in this political group did the bidding or the favors of Roscoe Conkling. This group was known as the Stalwarts. There was another faction at the time of the Republicans known as the Half-Breeds. And in 1880, during the 1880 presidential election, the two groups could not agree on who should be nominated for president on the Republican ticket. Eventually, a compromise would be reached, and James Garfield became the nominee. Although somewhat neutral, he was seen to some degree as a half-breed. Conkling ordered all his followers not to accept the position if it was offered to them to be the vice presidential nominee. However, Arthur, when it came his way, refused to follow the orders of Conkling, and he accepted. This would prove to be a window into what he would do as president. You see, Arthur, in his brief time as now, when Garfield was elected, the Garfield-Arthur ticket was elected as president, little did Arthur know he would quickly become president. Less than a year into his term as president, James Garfield was assassinated. This left ChesterArthur as the president. Conkling assumed that Arthur would do his bidding as president and would follow direction and toe the line of the organization. However, he didn't, largely going against Conkling and proving to be his own man, especially in matters such as civics reform. This makes Arthur one of the most interesting, underappreciated, and undervalued presidents in American history. American history textbooks like these give brief mentions of him. I'm saying to you that we are missing quite a bit. Given the opportunity and the time, I encourage you to look up, read more about, and discover more about Chester Alan Arthur, one of our most undervalued presidents.